to the ground. No one came to try and put it out. Donald Hines, his wife, and 5 children, who had only lived there about 3 weeks, lost all of their possessions in the blaze. At the time of the fire, no one was at home. It was Tom Allen, the warden of nearby Red Eagle Honor Farm, that spotted the fire. He said he called on his two-way radio and reported it. The Montgomery Fire Department was called several times, but was unable to come. Both Hines and his wife said the electrical wiring in the house was bad and had complained to their landlord about it. What sort of problems had you experienced with the house in the 3 weeks you lived here?
Gas line broke, electrical cords needed to be repaired, the sewage needed repairing, and he said he'd see about it.
What sort of problems with the electrical wiring?
Ones in the living room was hanging down and ceiling, and naked wires needed repairing.
The washroom.
In the washroom.
What do you think about watching your house just burn to the ground with no one coming to help and try to put it out?
That's ridiculous.
Do you think the city of Montgomery Fire Department should have come up here?
Yes, I do. I could have saved something. There's a gas tank over there that might blow any minute because there's nobody out here to put the fire out.
What do you plan to do now?
I don't know. Do the best we can, but we ain't got nothing now.
The people in the area seemed upset because the Montgomery Fire Department did not respond. Montgomery Fire Chief J.A. Odom says several factors, including unclear information, played a part.
The first call we received on it was a greenhouse was on fire, and there was some LP gas tanks close by the building. Of course, we thought it was a greenhouse where shrubs was grown and pot plants. At that time, we had 2 companies out. Of course, it's the responsibility of the alarm room. If no company is out, they can dispatch 1 pumper outside of the city limits. Of course, being 2 pumpers was out, they had to call the district chief in charge and get permission from him, and they explained to him that it was a greenhouse. We had 2 companies out, and it was in the police jurisdiction, so we did not respond to that call.
Meanwhile, the community is responding to the needs of the Hines family. The Chevron service station at 402 Cloverdale Road has been set up as a collection point for the household items they will need, and the local realtor has provided them a house to live in until they can find a new home. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
They deal with the lid bill, the ad valorem tax bill. It has been in this office for some time. The tax collectors and tax assessors around the state are very interested in getting it so that they'll at least have some guidelines as to how to implement that act, and it will be released today, along with other requests from tax assessors and tax collectors which are related to that particular issue. There is another opinion that has been here for quite some time regarding whether or not the mayor of Livingston can hold that position and also the position as a member of the State Ethics Committee. And we have ruled that it would be a violation. It would be holding 2 offices for profit. So that question has been answered, that he cannot hold both jobs.
Let's see if I can.
Southwest Montgomery at night. Police say it's easy to be robbed, assaulted, or to buy sex in this area. Young prostitutes, under pressure from pimps to make their quota for the night, sometimes rob their clients, according to police. when they find that they cannot meet the $100 per night price the girls have on their heads. We talked to one of those young admitted prostitutes about life on the Strip and what's expected of them by their pimps, which some police say contribute to the desperation of some of the young prostitutes. This woman started when she was 15. She says a local man taught her the ropes and is training other young girls.
Well, if you're working for him, he wants you to bring a certain amount of money home. If you don't get it, I guess he'll jump on you. But it never happened to me. But I have been jumped on.
By a pimp?
Yeah.
Your pimp?
Yeah.
Okay, so why would you stay if he would beat you?
Why'd I stay? I don't know. I had feeling for him. That's reasons I just got tired of it. I went for myself then.
Some of the other girls have problems with their pimps of being beaten because they didn't produce a certain amount of money?
I rate so. I believe so.
What would be the average price on your head, you say, per night that you'd have to bring in?
Well, some of them have $100 over the head, or a little bit more, or $200 a night.
Per night, that
One
they
night.
must produce?
Yep.
Or
Get jumped on and get something back.
how many other girls do you know who do this kind of thing at the truck stop in that area on the bypass?
Well, I don't know nobody.
5, 10, 15?
There's more girls than that.
Governor Fob James got a small taste of international protocol today when the Singapore ambassador to the United States paid a social visit to the state capitol. His Excellency Punch Coomaraswamy is being hosted by the World Trade Association on a tour of Alabama industries. The ambassador made a stopover visit while on his way to tour the state docks in Mobile. Both Coomaraswamy and James exchanged gifts before chatting briefly about the present trade negotiations between the U.S. and Singapore. Singapore recently bought a multi-million-dollar order of American-made airplanes. The meeting between the ambassador, the World Trade Association representatives, and James concluded behind closed doors. James' press aide, John Ham, says the visit was social, and although some business was discussed, no trade deals were expected to be made from today's talks. Coomaraswamy's next stop was scheduled to be the state docks. Singapore-registered ships make weekly calls to Alabama's Port of Mobile. The World Trade Association is working with Coomaraswamy on possible contracts with several Birmingham firms for jet fuel and petrochemical product valve equipment. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Senator Stewart dropped in on members of the Alabama Associated Press, meeting here in Montgomery for an educational workshop. Stewart said the press was always dropping in on him during the campaign. He's just returning the favor. And he also said he's fulfilling his campaign promise to regularly visit the state. The new senator says he's making the adjustment to national office.
The transition is going very smooth. We've got our office staff in Washington situated. We've got our caseworkers who are going to do most of the casework here in Alabama pretty well situated, and things are working out a lot better for us and getting organized a little bit quicker than we thought we would.
What are some of the major cases that you are working on for Alabama?
Well, of course, we're taking a look at some of our military bases. The one here in Montgomery, Maxwell, is something I'm very much concerned about, and we plan to take a tour of those bases sometime soon. I've been working in the Huntsville area with the Marshall Space Flight Center folks to make sure that we don't receive an inequitable number of cuts there. We're working with the folks in Ozark and the people down there who work for consolidation of the helicopter training school. So those are some of the kinds of things that we're doing in a major way.
Are you going to get into the moving of the TVA to Muscle Shoals?
Yes, I filed an objection with a standing objection with the majority leader who's chairman of the Democratic Policy Committee, and on my behalf and behalf of Senator Heflin, to any legislation that would negate the district court order or to any time agreement that would have anything to do with debate or discussion on the district court order. This will give us notice of any legislation that's filed by either Senator Baker or Senator Sasser from Tennessee. That's going to be a tough fight, though. but I think it's one that the senators and also the rest of the congressional delegation from the state of Alabama are obligated and should make.
Glenda Webb, WSFA TV News.
The Alabama Education Association Election Committee began tabulating the votes this morning from that organization's recent election. The over 35,000 eligible voters in the AEA voted in 2 statewide elections and 7 local district elections. Just over 23,000 members voted in the vice president, president-elect race, and there will be a runoff between Margaret B. Little and Sarah Swindle, both of Birmingham. In the other statewide race, Peggy Dodson ran unopposed for the state director of the National Education Association. Each of the AEA's 7 districts elected 1 member to the board of directors. Districts 2 and 3, which include Montgomery and surrounding vicinity, elected Nina H. Carpenter and Mary S. Raley, respectively. The members of the AEA Policymaking Board serve for a 3-year term. This is Michael Jones, WSFA TV News reporting.
Members of the Alabama chapter of the American Heart Association gathered informally today at the Montgomery Civic Center. The purpose of the gathering was to kick off plans for next month's annual fundraising campaign. State Chairman Arthur Cook of Birmingham says they have a big goal to meet in that fundraising drive.
We are enthusiastically looking forward to raising $875,000, which is our budget this year, in which most of these monies stay right here in Alabama, and additional funds are brought into the state for research at our 3 great universities, University of Alabama, Birmingham, Auburn, and the University of South Alabama. Some 1,400 research projects are in process to try to find the answer to stopping heart attacks and killing the #1 killer in the state.
Mrs. Baggett, of course, you have just left office as Secretary of State. What is your involvement with the Heart Fund Drive in Alabama?
Well, Dennis, I have been appointed honorary Heart Sunday chairman, and my work will be seeing to all of the residential workers over the state of Alabama. But you know, Dennis, when I was thinking about what a serious situation it is about heart disease and the progress that this organization has made in research, I feel that what efforts I can put forth, I want to put forth them in this Heart Association so that we can alleviate as much heart disease as we can.
Also present at today's kickoff was Governor Fob James, who presented the state chapter with a check for $3,000 from the board of directors of the state chapter of the American Heart Fund. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Coach Sanderson, you're coming off 3 road wins, and you've got to be pleased with that.
We really are. We think that we've, played good basketball, and it's a very tough basketball game down at Auburn, and then we had a close one at Florida, and we came back and got one into Horn to beat Mississippi State, and that has to be real pleasing to our coaching staff and also to our players.
As an assistant coach, you're in charge of recruiting in Alabama, and that's gotten complicated seemingly over the years.
Well, it really has. There are a lot of recruiting rules that you have to try to go by, and it's very difficult to try to get around and see all the basketball players, not only in this state but in surrounding states. And it's enjoyable, but it's very difficult, and about the time you get 4 or 5 signed, it's time to try to sign 4 or 5 more for the next year. So it sort of runs into each other, really.
What are some of the most frustrating rules that have binded you in your recruiting efforts?
Well, we have a 3-contact rule, which means that you can only contact the player and the parent only 3 times throughout the course of the year, and that's very difficult because sometimes I know that you feel you need to contact them more than 3 times in order to recruit them. That's been very hard. We have a 6-visit rule where a player can visit 6 different schools, have his way paid to 6 different schools. And we're just trying, on different kids, try to get them to come into our school and make our school one of the 6 that they visit. But there are a lot of different rules and things that take place in recruiting that make it very difficult. But it's enjoyable, and a player can make it an enjoyable experience if he'll do so.
The robber was described as a white heavyset male wearing blue jeans and a white jacket. He entered the bank early this afternoon carrying a small automatic pistol.
At a sack, approached all of our tellers, asking them to put money into the sack. No one was hurt. Our staff performed real fine, and an undetermined amount of money was taken.
Was there any personal property taken, like the cashier's purses, anything along that matter?
Not to my knowledge.
Did he make any personal threats to anyone in the bank at any time?
He did, but we won't go into that detail.
According to witnesses, the robber was driving a late model sports car. The automobile later was found in the parking lot of a nearby bakery by Deputy Sheriff Jim Tharp.
I was driving down Highway 80 watching for the car. We had the description on it, and I spotted it sitting over here in the parking lot at Colonial Bakery. And I checked the tag and verified it was a National Guard tag, and the red stripes and the white Camaro Rally Sport, and the hood was warm, so I suspected it to be the car, so I called it in.
The robbery is still under investigation at this time. Elaine Stewart, WSFA TV News.
The articles concerning education and the executive department were explained to the special House Senate committee. Questions about proposed Article 10 dealing with education included one about the makeup of the Board of Trustees of the University of Alabama and Auburn University. According to the proposed Constitution, the University of Alabama would have more members on its Board of Trustees than would Auburn University. One member wanted to know why all institutions of higher learning were not included in the Constitution. By far, most of the time was spent discussing Article 5, the executive branch. The proposed Constitution would remove the Secretary of State, State Treasurer, State Auditor, Commissioner of Agriculture, and county sheriffs from the executive branch. According to Mike Waters, an aide to Governor Fob James, this was done so that there could be more flexibility in the system. He said it would be the job of the legislature to enact other laws dealing with the operation of those offices removed from the executive branch. Senator Finus St. John asked if the exclusion of county sheriffs from the executive branch was worth not getting a new Constitution passed. Waters indicated that the committee did not have any strong feelings about removing sheriffs, and they could be put back into the draft Constitution. One subject that generated considerable discussion was the governor's veto powers. House Speaker Joe McCorkadell wants the new Constitution to clear up some of these questions.
There's been a question, and the courts have never ruled on a line item, we call it veto. That's a specific item in an appropriation bill that the governor might veto after the legislature has adjourned. While we're in session, there's no problem. But after the legislature has adjourned, and has happened many times in the past, that 11th hour action on appropriation bills, the legislature then goes home and leaves it with the governor. The question is this: can the governor delete or veto a certain item from that bill and the bill still be in force and effect? And what we want is just some clarification that the governor can line item an appropriation bill.
On Wednesday, the Special Interim Committee will take a look at the articles in the proposed drafted Constitution that deal with taxation and debt limitation. They'll also take a look at the article pertaining to the legislature. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the State Capitol.
Everybody knows you can get illegal drugs on the streets. You can also get high inside these prison walls. Officials of the prison system here in Alabama say homosexual problems rank first as the main cause of violence behind prison bars. Illegal drug trafficking is a close second. Kilby Warden Dale Howard.
In months past, we've had a good deal of problems with drugs, not only with inmates trying to smuggle in drugs, but also with free world people trying to bring in drugs past security here at this facility. I can recall one officer, and I know of several other, during our security checks with free world people coming in, that we have discovered drugs on the officers, and subsequently we made arrests after dismissing the officers bringing the drugs in. Quite frequently we have visitors that tries to bring the drugs in to the inmate. Anytime that you have that much quantity coming in, or that profit margin of the price of drugs trying to get into any facility, drives up the market price, and also when it comes in, it also leads to very stringent problems on the inside. opposed to the correctional facilities.
Alabama prison officials say methods of getting the contraband inside the prison include bow and arrow, with dope tied to the arrow and fired over the fence. They say drugs are stuffed inside tennis balls or basketballs and thrown over the fence, and they say some people smuggle drugs inside their body cavities into the prison. Inmates here at Kilby say the drug availability has dropped due to the searches of personnel and inmates.
I think another reason it's slowed down is because the shakedown procedures has toughened up. Where we had only one actually checkpoint where we was shook down, it's increased to 3 now. So you got 3 checkpoints you got to go through to be hand searched by an official before you say come from the main institution here back to the trailer complex. So this is added the risk that the inmate takes in bringing in the drugs.
A man that wears boxer shorts for one, he can cut the seam of his boxer shorts and slide them down his shorts in a line. He can cut the band, slide them right down the top, bring these type of drugs in, because they're just a little bit bigger than a match head. And it's good money for them in here if you can get them in.
It appears that prison officials first thought if they searched inmates frequently, they would stop the drug trafficking inside the prison walls. But when they started searching prison personnel, they found that they confiscated more drugs than ever before. And those searches continue inside the prison walls here in Alabama. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News, Kilby.
The procedure in the past has been that the chair is responsible, and the proper place to charge this type of environmental thing is to the building repair and maintenance environmental control account of the maintenance department. At the present time, that account is allotted $50,000. Which is the main motion now. It's one introduced by Mr. Starr. Signify by raising your hand.
Question. Is it the main motion introduced by Mr. Starr?
About this. This year we would like for you to consider giving us $20,000 to carry the emergencies for the entire year. Another place that so much of our money goes, we have between 200 and 300.
57-year-old Nina Mae DeVore was admitted to the Maxwell Air Force Base Hospital last December 24th, Christmas Eve. The next day, Christmas Day, she was dead from injuries received after she fell from the window of her 4th floor room. Air University Information Officer Lieutenant Colonel James Craig.
Sometime during the early morning hours of Christmas Day, December 25th, an attendant went into her room and discovered that she wasn't in her bed. And as he looked out the window of the room, he noticed that she was lying on the roof of the 1st floor of the hospital. She was taken to the hospital's intensive care unit, but they were unable to save her. She died at about 10 o'clock that morning.
The reason for Mrs. DeVore's admittance to the hospital was not revealed to us because, according to Colonel Craig, of the Right to Privacy Act. The circumstances surrounding the death of Mrs. Nina Mae DeVore is still under investigation by the Maxwell Air Force Base Office of Special Investigations. This is Michael Jones, WSFA TV News at Maxwell Air Force Base.
And we're flying her this morning to Cincinnati to the Burn Institute to be treated. She's burned all over her stomach and part of her right leg and her forearm on her right arm. And I just think that she can get the best care of anybody in the world up there. And we have the most and the latest facilities in this hospital. We're one of the best equipped hospitals in the world. And that's everything they do out there is for burn patients.
Good morning, Consumer Relations.
The phone in the Consumer Relations Office of the Alabama Public Service Commission has been ringing a lot this past week. On Monday, 2 incoming toll-free telephone lines were installed, enabling PSC staff members to help consumers in the state with their utility services problems. For those living in the city of Montgomery, the number is 832-6924. If you live outside the Montgomery Exchange, the toll-free number is 1-800-392-8050. The man who heads up the complaint department, Jack Hornady, says their first action on a called-in complaint is to make sure they have jurisdiction over the problem. Then, he says they contact an official of the utility involved in an effort to begin to solve it.
We go to their corporate headquarters with the complaint from this office. Now, there are two reasons for that. Number one, we get involved with an official of the company, and the official in this office will discuss the matter. The purpose in that is to let, number one, the headquarters of the company be aware immediately of the complaints that are coming against its services to this commission. Number two, it does not put us in direct contact with the person, the supervisory person or whatever in the local office of that utility with whom the complainant has potentially disagreed. Therefore, where there has been a problem of perhaps even just personality between the subscriber and the local office representative, we are able to discuss it with someone within the company, first of all with authority, and someone who has not been personally aggrieved by the complainant or vice versa. So we find it a smooth operation, really, to try to work it out, and naturally the utilities are quite eager to resolve all complaints in compliance with their own approved rules and the rules of this commission.
PSC officials say that each citizen should first give the utility companies a chance to take action to correct the complaints before calling the Commission's complaint department. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
The study shows that full-time student enrollment in the South was dropping at a rate of 2.2% as compared to 2.9% nationally. However, the decline was offset by an increase of 5.6% in part-time students in the South compared to a 3.1% increase nationwide. We talked with Dean Lawrence Durham at the University of Alabama about enrollment trends there, and we asked him which types of institutions and which regions of the country will be most affected by the decline in the number of full-time students.
Well, as I've mentioned, I think it's unquestionable that the private institutions will be much more dramatically affected by these factors than will public institutions. By no means, though, will the public institutions escape these factors. And we at the University of Alabama, as have other institutions across the country, had to already deal with these factors and make our plans in accord with that. Regionally, I would think that the South would experience a lesser impact to a certain extent because of the Sun Belt phenomena and because of the traditional patterns of education in the South changing. We're seeing more part-time students. We're seeing people come back to school who have not had as full an education in the traditional age group years. That will impact positively the influence in the South. In essence, we have a pool that is undereducated to a certain extent when compared to the national average. And we anticipate that the increased access of higher education in the South, and in particular Alabama, is going to serve the needs of these people like never before, and that indeed that will have a positive impact on enrollment, and more especially it'll have a positive impact on society because of these people gaining from it. I think the regions of the country that stand to suffer the most would probably be the upper Midwest and the New England areas because of the population ratios to the number of existing schools, particularly, as I said, in the private sector.
The Southern Regional Education Board says that factors influencing the lower rates of attendance in the fall of 1978 probably include students choosing jobs over further education in 1978, a year of relatively high employment, and increased federal audits of a student's financial background, which seems to have discouraged some students from enrolling and delayed others in receiving replies to their aid requests. This is Bob Howell, WSFA TV News.
A cold front that originated in East Texas moved into Alabama last night, bringing with it falling temperatures and gusting winds here in Montgomery. Around 2 o'clock this morning, the winds reached speeds of 46 miles per hour. There were reports of some trees and tree limbs down in parts of the city and a few traffic lights malfunctioning, but these relatively minor problems were taken care of. But on the Auburn University at Montgomery campus, the problem was a bit more serious. The strong winds blew a dead tree onto some 12,000-volt power line, shorting out a circuit breaker and causing an explosion at the AUM substation, which provides power to the entire campus. Alabama power repairmen worked on the substation all morning, and shortly before noon, the power was restored.
Tree falling on the line caused a high short circuit, and as the short circuit occurred, the breaker, low side oil switch, did not clear the fault, and the breaker caught on fire, and the fault went on through the transformer bank and blew the high side fuses on the Auburn University of Montgomery substation.
You said you have to be bringing in another circuit breaker.
We can pick up the load on the 2 remaining breakers that we have in the substation by tying conductors or circuits together, and we will have to bring in another breaker to replace the failed breaker.